Kill 6 Billion Demons is a comic, a very good one at that I'll probably talk about at a later date because this video is about the tabletop RPG taking place in the same world. It is one of the multiple RPGs created by this comic's writer, and while Kill 6 Billion Demons is by far his most famous work, this game is really not talked about. I don't think there are even any videos about it on YouTube. The game is available on Abbadon's Patreon for $2 to $3, but if you can't manage to scrape that much together to support an independent artist, there's probably a PDF of it floating around somewhere. This video exists to help you get a grasp on the basics, and I'm making it basically to get my friends over the daunting task of having to read the whole manual so we can get to playing faster. Feel free to use it on your own players, but game masters might want to read the whole thing through at least once to really get a grasp on what the game is all about. This video will have chapter markers, so feel free to skip around to the subjects you care about. I'll also be in the comments answering any questions you might have. Broken Worlds takes place in the multiverse of the Great Wheel, a setting with multiple universes and dimensions, all connected to a single hub world, Throne, the corrupt and ruined heavenly realm where the gods once ruled and lived. Some of these worlds are mentioned in the comic and you can take inspiration from them, but Throne connects a total of 777,777 worlds, so you're completely free to invent your own. The wheel has a long and especially bloody history. The feats of many great and terrible men and women have hammered it into the shape it is today. First, there is Yishun, the unparalleled infinite god, who was quite miserable, leading a perfect circular existence. So, to end singularity, Yishun divided itself into two primordial beings, the black and white flame. These two new beings were so horrified by each other's hideousness, they warred for 7 years and then made love for 7 hours, again dividing themselves into hundreds of thousands of gods. In the void of nothingness, these gods made a city for themselves where they lived, loved, and sometimes warred with each other, as was custom. A few stories about events taking place during the reign of the gods survive to this day, although many details have been heavily altered, so they can't be trusted as exact historical sources. Eventually, one of them, the god of craftsmen Unkos, decided to create new beings. He made thousands of servant races, immortal beings designed for a specific purpose within Throne. In order to make sure these creatures did not sin, aka disobey the gods, he also created the first angels. Angels are made from cold white fire infused with the law. They belong in the void outside of reality and can only interact with the physical world through a body of stone they inhabit. Normally, everything should have stopped there, but one of the other gods, Yish Aizma, was jealous of this monumental achievement, so she took a bit of the black flame and clumsily hid it on the anvil. She created the race of humanity, but being a poor craftsman, she gave them a vital flaw, mortality. Every human soul flame will eventually fade. This made humans frail, but also gave them something much more powerful in return. The souls of men burn with meaning, brighter than even the gods. They wield a fiery will that can tear reality apart. Inspired by these new beings, the gods realized the limits of their own eternal existence. So like Yishun, they all eventually killed themselves. Each one faced a different direction into the void and cast a fiery line from their very soul, creating a new universe. These lines became the spokes of a giant burning wheel. Humans and servants were cast out of Throne, while the angels remained to guard the corpses. After the gods had been decaying for a while, someone had found a way to pierce the veil between worlds. He had hoped to meet God, but became the inheritor of creation instead. He battled all the prime angels and defeated them, sparing only one to extract the secrets of creation out of him. He was Zos, the conquering king. This is known as the First Conquest. With this power, he called other remarkable individuals from the multiverse to his side. These saints, kings, and warrior poets built a society of enlightened equals above which he installed himself as ruling king. They called themselves the Demiurges. In Throne, these demiurges learned more about the secrets of reality. They even found a way to bind devils to their will and become more powerful. But after some time, maybe to spread their enlightenment, maybe just in a thirst for power, they decided to break their isolation. To accomplish this, Zos molded the power of the gods into different keys which could each access a different universe. And so, the long process of linking every world in existence to Throne began. The long and bloody Second Conquest. For a time, Throne became the greatest multi-dimensional metropolis to ever exist. But the demiurges had plenty of issues among themselves. Eventually, when debate and reason could no longer solve these problems, they went to war with each other. Their power ravaged the multiverse, sometimes destroying entire worlds. When it all came to an end, only 7 of the hundreds of thousands of demiurges were left standing. None of the 7 were strong enough to destroy the others, so they made a pact of neutrality, dividing creation among themselves. The pact of the 7-part world. Each of them crawled back into their lair, expanding their empires, ruling over them with an iron fist. Throne is the only truly neutral ground, overpopulated, infested with criminal guilds and slavers, the nexus of a destroyed and decaying multiverse, filled with the bones of gods. That is the world you play in Broken Worlds, a dark, decaying multiverse that is at the threat of becoming even worse. That is the world you play in, but how do you play? Broken Worlds is intended to be a group of extraordinary, powerful characters overcoming disaster in this vast multiverse. These characters are trying to solve a specific problem set up by the game master. The goal, like any tabletop RPG, is to tell a story with the players. The rules exist to put a constraint on player actions by rolling dice. The absolute minimum you need to play is 2 6-sided dice, but bring a few more, a play sheet and a pencil. Most of the time you'll be rolling those 2d6, meaning the results will be distributed like this. Even if you have them, do not use a d12. The game is balanced for this chance distribution. It's very important this is used. Luckily, not everything is completely up to the roll of the dice. The idea that dice rolls will be modified by player statistics, status effects, certain conditions is not very new, but Broken Worlds has a few interesting mechanics in this system. A regular modifier just means add or subtract X amount from your roll when a condition is met. A forward modifier means add or subtract X amount to your very next roll only when a condition is met. To illustrate this difference, a regular modifier would be something like, when your enemy is on the ground, gain +1. While the ongoing modifier could be something like, when you push an enemy to the ground, gain +1 forward. After the very next turn, it doesn't matter that they're on the ground anymore, that doesn't give you any advantage against them. And then there are ongoing modifiers which last as long as a specific condition specifies, could be until a status effect is removed, until you rest, something like that. But next to these modifiers, there are also multiple ways to roll the dice. A normal roll is just 2d6 plus modifiers, but a roll could also be clumsy, your character isn't proficient in doing that, or skill doesn't apply in this case. You roll 2d6, but with no positive modifiers. In worse cases, when something you're trying to do is especially difficult or you're in a really tough situation, your roll could be broken. You roll 3d6 and pick the lowest 2 results. And the inverse of that, a roll could become empowered. You roll 3d6 and pick the highest 2 results with no negative modifiers. You perform an extraordinary feat of heroism. The best way to get an empowered roll is by spending something called power dice. I'll explain more about what those are in a later section of the video. And then, perhaps this game's most unique concept is hold, a sort of currency you spend to change the effects of your actions. It works sort of like this: when making certain moves, the higher you roll, the more hold you will gain. You can then spend this hold to get certain effects specific to this move. Hold doesn't travel over to other moves, that's very important. So you spend your hold on certain effects, The specific conditions are detailed in the move, and this will then happen when you perform this action. Cut to the previous stake, the one that was good, the one that still had the video intact. I love video corruption, it's so cool. This is, in my opinion, best illustrated with an example. A player wants to use acuity, aka keenness, to overcome their enemies with mental quickness. So they roll 2d6 when the game master tells them to and add their mind stat to the result. If they rolled above a 10, they gain 3 hold. If they rolled between a 7 and a 9, they gain 2 hold, but their enemy also gets 1 counter against them. Below a 6 is a miss, nothing happens. With acuity, you can spend hold 1-to-1 for certain effects against an enemy as long as you act on your knowledge you gained about them. That's vague, but it allows the game master to kind of tailor it to the situation. Those specific effects are: you reduce a single source of damage from your target by 1. Their sword, their fists, their gun, pick one, pick wisely. You can give a source of damage against your target one of the following tags: armor penetrating, forceful, messy, area, or destructive. What all these tags mean I'll explain later, it's just bonuses that modify your attack in some way. Or you can increase a single source of damage against your target by 1. Your sword, your fist, your gun. Go ham. And if I understand correctly, you can choose any of these options as many times as you want, unless the move specifies otherwise. Also, be warned, those enemy counters can be vicious. By far, not every move you'll make will involve hold, but all player actions that have actual consequences, we don't want to be rolling for irrelevant stuff, will require making a move. Some moves are universal while others are character specific or can even be tied to a specific item if you decide to set it up that way. The Game Master has their own moves to help tell the story, but what is very important for both parties to realize is that everything should flow from player actions. They get the most agency because through their characters, they are telling the story. Let's move on to player characters. Player characters are extraordinary individuals within the multiverse, able to wield the Flame Immortal and fearsome martial arts. They can range from shadowy assassins to guild bosses who fight with their entire gang to table-wielding beggars. A character's information is all written down on their play sheet, you know, like most tabletop RPGs. One of the most important things to remember is that these 9 character archetypes are not classes. There is only one version of each character in the entire story. Your players cannot choose the same one twice. No matter what archetype your players end up picking, there are 5 stats each of them will need to worry about. Depending on the archetype, some stats may be more or less important, but that is told to you on the play sheet. Also, if your game includes the advanced martial arts from the optional rules section of the manual, your players might want to check those out beforehand and kind of manage their stats in line with the build they want to create. At level 0, every player starts with the same stat distribution: +2, +1, another +1, 0, and a -1. They are free to assign these however they like. Yes, this game skips over the whole annoying stat to modifier conversion. You just get the modifier straight out of the box, add it to the roll, no questions asked. Oh, and these stats can range from -3 to +3, not higher or lower. Just establishing that already, because it will come up eventually once you level up enough. The 5 stats are body, which is your physical power, how muscular, bulky you are, how much you can lift. If your character is focused on body, they'll use their physical strength to get out of tough situations, to win fights, etc. Reflex, which is your speed, agility, and accuracy. A character with high reflex will rely on their incredible speed to win fights, and they will be able to perform kind of impossible feats like catching arrows in mid-air, running up walls for a certain length, maybe even dashing across water or jumping off of the blade of a sword. Heat, which is courage, bravery, but could also be savagery, intimidation. It is whatever inspires your allies and makes your enemies quake in their boots. A character with high heat will be a master of social situations and being able to keep their head cool under pressure. It is basically your character's cool factor. High heat can help you get a girl's number at a bar or scream so hard your enemies turn around and run away. Breath is a measure of how in touch with atom or soul you are. Having high breath not only means you have incredible constitution and health, but it also means you've aligned the energy pathways in your body to the point you can perform literally impossible feats of endurance, like deflecting blades with your bare skin, which is actually an ability one of the archetypes gets. It's super cool, especially in a story context, like it's a crucial moment and you succeed a roll and just deflect whatever weapon comes at you, no matter how strong. Incredible storytelling, can't wait to use it. And finally, mind, which is intellect, vision, acuity, perception. Characters with high mind do not only know a lot of things, they can pick up on things faster and better than anyone else. You're a master at reading not only situations, but also people. Figure out when they're lying to you. Find out where something might be hidden that others would have missed, and use this knowledge to your deadly advantage. You advance these stats over the course of the game, but as I've mentioned, never above 3 or below -3. That might seem a little strange, same with the fact that you only level up 10 times, but it does make sense. Once you've leveled up 10 times, the story really should be finishing up because your characters have become so ridiculously strong, nothing should really be a challenge to them. And the cap on 3 exists to prevent you from dumping everything into a single stat, using that to attack and just mowing everything down with no resistance. But now we get to the interactive stuff that players will enjoy. Making your own character. Everyone has chosen an archetype, no doubles hopefully, and it's time to fill in all the blanks that are left on the play sheet. Starting with race, there are 4 races you can play as in Broken Worlds, but not every archetype has access to every single race, because it would not make sense for a law character to be a devil who is fundamentally a creature of chaos, for example. Race has no real effects on your stats or rolls, but will affect the way you roleplay, how characters in the world will perceive you, etc. The 4 races are humans, the most numerous race in the multiverse, the most adaptable, the most multicultural, and with the highest potential for power. Servants, one of the races created by the gods to fulfill a specific purpose. When you play a servant, you should explain to the game master what your race was designed for, what it looks like as a result of that, stuff like that. Angels, the ancient protectors of Throne, the core world of the multiverse. They are fiery beings born from the void that can only exist in the material world in their stone husks. Most angels will follow the old law, but there are fanatics and rogues among their number. You get to pick what you want to be. Lastly, devils, creatures of the black flame, scheming, malevolent, chaotic. There's a bunch of lore about devils, like their masks and the kind of colors there are. If you're really serious about playing a devil, look up more of the lore. It's too complicated to completely explain here, but the main thing is you value chaos and wildness above all else. Proficiencies. Each of the archetypes will have a list of which weapons and armor you are proficient with. Most of the times this will be a list, but sometimes you'll be forced to make a choice between certain options. Just read the specifics to find out. The most important purpose of proficiency is finding out whether or not an attack made with a certain weapon should be clumsy or not. It also determines what type of armor you can wear. Also, the armor goes in a tiered system where heavy armor proficiency already implies light and medium armor proficiency. If you're not proficient with a certain type of armor, it means you can't move and fight effectively while having it on. It simply restricts you too much. Gear. Every archetype also starts with its own starting gear, which is most of the time just a huge list you can pick and choose from. If you want, you can just take everything. To see the specific value and properties of every single item, simply check chapter 6 of the manual. I'm not going to list them all here, that would get boring very, very quickly. Every archetype at the start, of course, has access to the same universal moves everyone gets. They also get the basic moves for their archetype, and at level 1, only at level 1, not at the start, they get one advanced move from their playsheet. Or If your campaign chooses to use them, they can also pick an advanced martial art or advance a move they already have if it's a move that can be further developed. You level up using experience, which you gain not simply by killing enemies, but by training and advancing your character's story. Once you've gathered experience equal to your level +3, you can spend those points to level up. Each time you level up, you can choose another advanced move from your archetype, or, again if your game uses them, an advanced martial art. On top of that, at levels 3, 6 and 9, you can increase one of your statistics by 1 for a maximum of +3. At those same levels, you also gain a new weapon proficiency, so your arsenal grows stronger. And then the best part about creating your own character: who are they as a person? What is their personality? What are their goals? This can be very easily expressed with the concept of burning will. A character's burning will is whatever their ultimate goal or desire is. You can write it down, it can change over the course of the game. It should be something simple but vague so you can build your role playing around it. Something like, protect my country from invaders, defeat the tyrant ruling over my people, maybe just become the strongest swordsman in the land. Pick and choose anything you want. Next to their burning will, a character must also have a flaw. A flaw is something that drives them forward, but in a self-destructive, negative way. For example, mistrust, or greed, or jealousy, something like that. So when you're choosing a flaw, be smart about it. Make sure it's something that allows your character to change over the course of the game. They do not have to resolve it by the end of the game. Not everyone needs to become a perfect, enlightened individual. Just make sure that your character is dynamic and not a static piece of wood. The final crucial part of your character's personality are their bonds. These are their relationships with other player characters, which can help kickstart the roleplay at the first session. It kind of avoids the problem of all the characters just suddenly getting together in a tavern and all becoming friends. It makes sure there is tension within the group dynamic. Certain people will trust each other more than the rest. Stuff like that can get really interesting, especially when you incorporate the result of different combat scenarios. Power dice are like a last tiny thing I have to explain. It doesn't really fit in the combat system explanation, which is right after this, so I'm putting it here. Player characters are extraordinary individuals within the multiverse, able to bend reality to their will. This is expressed in the mechanics of the game through power dice. You are automatically given one of them upon character creation, but can earn more over the course of the game by starting a new session, pushing a move, more about what that is later, the game master giving you one for narrative purposes, or training your character. The purpose of these power dice is very simple. You spend them to accomplish an impossible feat, as specified in the Channel Flame move. Basically, they turn any roll you might make into an empowered roll. When you roll 3d6, pick the highest 2 results and no negative modifiers, or you can use them to mitigate a broken roll, turning it into a regular one. Narratively, this means your character channeling the Flame Immortal to do something that is literally unimaginable. Cutting through the air itself, jumping over an entire mountain range, surviving the heat at the core of a planet, avoiding being crushed by a giant planet-sized being, putting its palm on you, stuff like that. It can get as insane as your game master allows it to. Also important, you lose all your power dice at the end of a session, so make sure to spend them, don't be stingy. You can also not hold more than 3 of them at a time. The game really wants to encourage you to do these cool things and allow the narrative to go in wild directions. The game master also has their own equivalent of power dice called break dice, and they're used to represent an unfortunate twist of fate befalling the characters. But the game master does not have access to break dice at the beginning of the session. They only get them through the player's actions. Finally, the fun part. How does combat work in this game? Trying to save the world from breaking apart will at some point require you get into a fight. You can make your character as charismatic or as sneaky as you want. You will not be able to avoid combat. Of course, the core of any combat system is in how you deal and avoid being dealt damage. Dealing damage is fairly simple. It does not depend on the roll of the dice or the weapon you're holding, but on the stats of your archetype itself. A lot of weapons, if you roll really well, have a flourish which you can activate to gain an extra effect on your damage or against your enemy in some way. This can be things like making the damage armor piercing or happening in an area to multiple enemies at once, stuff like that. The specific flourishes for each type of weapon are detailed in a list in chapter 6. I don't have the time to go over it, just check what type of flourish your weapon has. They will usually activate on a +10 reach heaven through violence roll. Also, really important, you get to decide the outcome of your weapon flourish, not the game master. This is one of the only times you have direct control over the flow of combat, so use it. Weapons are also important because when you're using a weapon you're not proficient in, the roll becomes clumsy. Damage always goes to a single source, unless it's area damage, but you can't split damage between targets. For example, if your archetype does base 2 damage, you can't put 1 into 2 enemies. That's not how it works. It's 2 into a single target, always. That's just a specification made by the rules to avoid any arguments at the table. Also, some moves you make during combat will require your full focus, meaning you can't effectively move, defend yourself, or do something else while you're trying to accomplish that goal. But important to keep in mind is the fact that most damage you'll receive will be reactive, meaning it happens when you make a bad roll on an attack. The enemy kind of has to wait for you to flunk your attack to effectively get an opening and strike at you, unless the game master has set up some sort of trap or ambush. As you can probably tell, most damage numbers in Broken Worlds remain pretty low compared to other RPGs, so this is how the scale is supposed to work. 1. Incidental damage, a short fall, an improvised weapon. 2. A long fall, a sword blow, a gunshot, normal combat damage. 3. A serious gunshot, assault rifle fire, a blow from an ogre, savaged by a beast, a grenade explosion. 4. Being shot by a cannon, hit by a massive boulder, a multi-story fall, ravaged by a frenzied demon. And then double it up. 8. Being crushed by a colossal being, immersed in acid or lava. Eventually, at the very end of the scale. 12. Being crushed by a moon-sized being, lacerated in the jaws of the world wolf. This scale is not an iron rule set. Some damage will have special effects, making it more dangerous, and stuff like being submerged in oil will probably bypass most types of defenses you have. But luckily, even when an enemy would strike at you, there are ways to protect yourself. Armor works a bit like a point buying system, where a single point of armor can be spent to reduce the damage from a single source by 3. This can turn certain attacks completely ineffective. From a single source just means that you're not reducing the damage of an enemy themselves, but their sword, their fist, something like that. Of course, armor penetration bypasses this point buying system. All armor points from equipment or your special moves are regained upon a rest. More about what that is later. If your armor is unable to nullify an attack, your stamina will suffer. Stamina is a measure of how well you can keep on fighting. It tracks your small combat wounds, your overall level of tiredness, and how hurt you are. When your stamina runs out, all damage dealt to your character will inflict wounds. These are pretty serious because when they run out, you have to make the shattered roll to see if you survive. Important to note here, it doesn't matter how much damage is dealt in total, getting to your last wound is always the same. If you have 2 wounds left and someone inflicts 12 damage, that's the same as if they would have inflicted 2 damage. It doesn't matter. Regaining your stamina, for example when an ally uses bolster, does not regenerate wounds, they stay. Your defenses simply go back up. Then, what is the shattered roll? When you're at 0 wounds, you roll a 2d6 plus breath. Also, each time you have to make this roll again without having rested, you take a -1 penalty. So, the first time no penalty, second time -1, third time -2, and that keeps happening until you rest. If you roll above a 10, you heal 1 wound you recover for now. On a 7 to a 9, you heal 1 wound and recover, but also the Game Master chooses one, or you choose 2 of the penalties listed in the move. Meaning if you want to reduce the penalty amount, you leave it up to the Game Master and how evil they want to be that day. But if you want more control of what happens to your character, you'll have to make the choice, but you have to pick 2 instead. You cannot choose the same one twice. These penalties are: you take major damage, almost knocking you out of the fight entirely. All your rolls are broken until you take a rest. Or lose a chunk of your body, such as a finger, tooth, or earlobe, a small part. You could also lose a limb in part or whole. Or you could lose some weapon or armor, it's simply gone. You can also gain a nasty scar somewhere on your character. On a miss, you die or you instantly make a defy fate roll. What is that? Well, defy fate. You try to escape death by making a clumsy roll. On more than a 10, heal 1 wound, you avoid your fate for now. On a 7 to a 9, heal 1 wound. You survive, very good, but you have to choose one. You, not the Game Master. You are disfigured or badly injured and take a permanent -1 to a stat of your choice. You are forced into a hard bargain with a greater power for your petty soul. You permanently lose something precious, a limb, a memory, etc. On a miss, RIP, it's over, you are claimed by death or reincarnation. Luckily, not all damage is permanent and there are ways to heal it. To heal damage, there are a few separate possibilities. Taking a respite. You find a safe place and enough time, 15 to 30 minutes, to catch your breath, bind your wounds, and take a sip of water. You recover stamina, but not your wounds. Some moves will reset on a respite, others will require a rest to recover. It's basically the short rest, long rest system, pretty standard. Most people will understand it. Taking a rest is a bit more complicated. You find a safe place and enough time, hours to days, to fully recover your strength. The whole party decides how many wounds they would like to heal in total and then appoints one person to make a roll. They do that, and the total amount of wounds healed is subtracted from the result of that roll. You cannot decide to not heal wounds if the result turns out unfavorably. On a 10+, you're able to grasp the time to gather your strength. For now, regain the wounds you chose, all stamina and all armor. You can basically only do this with only healing 2 wounds, because otherwise you're immediately dipped into the lower results. On a 7 to 9, choose one from the on-miss options, but take out the word significant. You regain all the wounds you chose, all stamina, all armor. Very cool. But then, on a miss, your enemies gain something significant from your rest. Ground, time, resources, allies, etc. Or you lose something significant from your rest. Ground, time, items of power, resources, allies, etc. For example, the second one could be a few bandits run into your camp and while you're trying to recover, steal some items from you, maybe an important weapon or something like that. The first one would be that while you were resting, your enemy found a shortcut through a mountain path and has set up a more defensive position in a passageway somewhere that you'll have to defeat later. The Game Master does not have to tell you right away what you've lost from your rest. Simply write it down somewhere if it's not something the characters would realize in that moment. You can get pretty nasty with this. Because the writing down confirms what you've chosen, you could have a situation where a character is attacked, reaches for their weapon in their tent, only to figure out it's not there because someone snuck in and stole it. Good luck. Tags. Tags are some of the special features that can influence combat. They're a long list of all kinds of effects. If you'd rather read this off a list in the manual, skip this section, I wouldn't blame you. It gets pretty boring and confusing pretty quickly. The only thing you should stick around for is my explanation of range. Broken Worlds doesn't work with set distance number, but range bands, which indicate roughly how far things are from each other. These bands are intimate, closer than hand-to-hand combat. You're right up in the other person's face. Hand, which is hand-to-hand combat. Close, which is close enough to hear comfortably, within earshot basically. Far, which is still clearly in visual range but too far to make out what someone is saying. Extreme, which is out of visual range. Weapons are always limited at the range they are meant to be used at, indicated in the item description. You can sometimes use weapons outside of their intended range, but then you'll have to make a broken roll. As a game master, you could also implement some system where making absurd moves with range is impossible, like using a sword at extreme distance, unless maybe if a player spends a power dice to empower their roll, which is broken, to make it a regular roll, and then they do something cool, anime-esque, like cutting the air in half or something. If you're allowing that, that could make some pretty interesting fights happen. Sometimes the things you want to hit have certain properties which might make that more difficult. For example, group. Targets with the group tag fight as a mass or group. They deal 1 extra damage to targets without the group tag and take 1 less damage from targets without the group tag. Attacks with the area tag always deal normal damage to groups. They ignore the -1 modifier. Basically, there's an entire mass of enemies, and because they're so tightly packed together, fighting as one, they're more effective against single opponents, and single opponents are less effective against them unless you use an attack which does area damage. Pretty easy. Huge. Huge targets are massive or physically imposing. They deal +1 damage to targets without the huge tag and take 1 less damage from targets without the huge tag. If you combine the two, a huge group could represent like a massive horde or a mob of individuals trying to attack you. These tags can also be applied to player characters when they make certain moves or meet certain conditions. So you do extra damage in the same way an enemy with these tags would. Then there are damage effects, which are things you'll want to watch out for because they can make a hit hurt extra hard. Armor piercing, AP. Armor cannot be spent against this damage. It always goes directly to stamina or wounds. Area damage. Inflict damage over an area around the target, dealing either incidental or full damage to everyone within. Incidental damage is always 1 damage, but if it does full damage, the character's complete damage stat is applied to everything within the area. Very powerful. They deal normal damage to groups. Brutal damage always inflicts an extra wound on top of whatever damage it does, even when you have stamina left or use armor to stop the attack. Destructive damage. Good at destroying objects, weapons, furniture, terrain, walls, vehicles, etc. If an object takes destructive damage, it is completely pulverized, mangled, or wrecked. Forceful. Damage dealt with this tag knocks targets completely off their feet or sends them flying, and staggers larger targets. It may or may not give its target the reeling tag. A player rolls a d6 to see if that happens, and on a 4 to 6, the target gets the reeling tag. That's a status effect, more about those in the next section. Lingering. Lingering damage cannot be healed normally during a respite or rest, and will require special conditions to heal. When you take lingering damage, it must be established what caused it and what will heal it. Messy damage deals incredible bodily harm or violence, has about a 50% chance to deal increased damage or incidental damage to and around its intended target. Basically, 1 more extra damage either to the target or something next to it because the attack is so chaotic and wild. The Game Master can decide whether this happens or has to make a roll for it. Lastly, vicious damage does double damage to stamina specifically. Then there are status effects. These are inflicted by and on player characters or NPCs by certain damage types, circumstances, items, you name it. Reeling, momentarily disabled or disoriented by pain, shock, or otherwise. A reeling NPC can't deal damage, and any other actions they take are far less effective. A reeling player character skips the next action they would take in order to recover. Lose this tag after a few moments have passed. Crippled, disabled or inhibited by some action, environment or injury. When a player character or NPC is crippled, establish what ails them and what sense or part of their body is affected. Until whatever crippled them is resolved, a crippled NPC or player character loses effective use of that part of their body. Stunned. A stunned player character or NPC cannot take actions other than weakly defend themselves and move slowly, only recover after a respite or until someone else takes action to help them. Evasive. Moving fast, unable to be struck or caught easily. If you have this tag, you cannot take damage but can be subjected to other effects. You lose this tag when a particular condition is met, or you are immobilized, disabled, or cannot move effectively. Basically, whatever has the evasive tag is moving around so quickly, nobody can really hit them until they stop them or do something else to inhibit their movement. And then we have unstoppable. An unstoppable target cannot be knocked down, thrown off their feet, restrained or halted in their movement. They cannot gain the reeling or stun tags as long as they have this tag. Basically, you're such a unit, nobody can knock you down, push you out of the way, or make you even stop moving for a second. You're going at it. Then there are a bunch of item tags which describe specific properties of items that are important to gameplay. Some of these are important in combat, but they also apply more generally. Focus simply means the item requires focus to use. You can't be doing anything else or moving around while using it. Fine means especially high quality. Basically, it's 3 times more expensive as a regular version of that item because it's so well made. Hidden, easy to conceal, won't be noticed on a simple inspection. You can smuggle it into places as long as they're not looking too hard. Infinite means that you have as many as you need. They're not literally infinite. You can't throw your bag of infinite knives at someone, but you won't be running out of knives in combat at any time. Light, easy to stow, carry and draw. Easily wielded in one hand but has shorter reach. You can always use it while performing other activities with ease, such as climbing or riding. You can also always attack with this weapon at intimate range. Loading, this weapon uses ammunition, so it might require reloading, get jammed or run out of ammo at inopportune times. Potent simply means moves made while wielding that weapon can be made with body as a modifier. Precise means the same but for reflex. When you're wielding this weapon, you can make certain moves with reflex as a modifier on top of anything else that might be necessary. Thrown simply means this melee weapon can be used to make an attack at range, at whatever range specified in the item description. Unwieldy, difficult to stow, carry or draw. You can't run, climb, sneak, swim, ride, or perform fine motor activities effectively while wielding this weapon or wearing this armor. Basically, it's big, bulky, and you're not very practical while holding it. Think of it as like a giant battle axe. Can't really go around climbing a mountain, riding a horse when you're lugging it around. With all those tags out of the way, let's quickly discuss combat structure. Combat serves a specific role within the story, so not every encounter should follow this strict format, but there is a structure there for you to use if you want. In this case, combat happens in rounds where every player needs to do something before the round can restart. In this case, there is no initiative mechanic because the system is meant to encourage short one-on-one confrontations between a character and an enemy. Those enemies will often only act as a reaction to the player, so they do not get their own round, which is why initiative is not necessary. The turn order doesn't matter, your characters all do something. Whether they fail or succeed has certain consequences, and then the round restarts and all the characters pick something else to do. It is generally the case that in a single round a character can make a combat move and move a single range band unless some condition means they can move faster, like being on a vehicle, and do another action that doesn't constitute a combat move. For example, picking something up, moving an object in the room, etc. Always remember, if the round-to-round action of a battle is less important than the narrative flow of the event, you can choose to abandon this structure completely. For example, imagine your party becomes part of a huge army and they're fighting together with other NPCs against an army of enemy grunts. Having to make attack rolls for every single time you might strike down an enemy would get really boring really quickly. So instead, have your players all make an attack roll, maybe an agility roll, an acuity roll. Have them choose one of their combat abilities that they roll for, look at those results and determine how the battle goes in its entirety from there. Describe how the players influence the course of this battle over many hours instead of having them roll over and over again every time they swing their sword around and hit like 5 heads clean off. And then, if the party might come across a powerful enemy general who is a real match for them, switch from this narrative style to the structured style and describe in detail how they attack and defeat this enemy. You can mix the two however you like. If you really enjoy rolling dice, you might want to stick to structured combat entirely. It's up to the game master and also the players to keep telling the story interesting and not get bogged down by unnecessary formalities of rolling the dice. Also, I almost forgot, if you care about having an economy within your campaign that really controls what kind of materials or weapons your players can have access to, Throne is so multicultural, connected to so many universes, there isn't really a single trading system. So your characters won't track their buying power in gold pieces, but in wealth, which is a general measure of how much valuable stuff they have on their person. This system can be very flexible if you want it to, but if you just don't care about it and want to use wealth as if it was a currency, you just exchange without any issues, go ahead, just do that. Also, as I explained with the item tags, a fine item is worth about 3 times as much as a regular version of that same item. Just do the calculation in your head, it's not that hard. For the final section of this video, I thought it might be useful to go over the basic moves every character gets. So when you choose an archetype and look at its unique moves, you have the tools and terminology to understand what those mean. Let's start off with the universal moves. These are moves used in conjunction with other moves and can be used at any time, no matter what else you're doing. Channel Flame, when you make a move, you can choose to spend a power die to make the roll empowered. When you use this move, you can perform an extraordinary heroic feat. A nimbus of power appears around your character. Your eyes glow, your voice resonates, or something similar. You get to choose what it looks like. Channel Flame can be used to do something that would normally be considered impossible for a player character. For example, if a character wanted to punch a mountain asunder, leap into the stratosphere, or convince an entire crowd unanimously that they are in fact the Emperor, they probably could not do that with a normal reach heaven through violence, agility, or bend will move. But if they used Channel Flame, they certainly could. All player archetypes also get a unique ability that allows them to spend power dice for a certain effect. Other moves may also allow you to spend power dice. When you use the dice, it's gone. You can't hold more than 3 at a time and you lose your reserve at the end of a session. All basic stuff, we've gone over it before. The next universal move is a way to gain power dice. Push. When you want to attempt something particularly foolhardy, heroic, impressive, or risky, make a move, but before you roll, you may declare that you are pushing a move. If you push the move, the roll becomes clumsy or broken, but it is only broken if it would already have been broken before pushing the move. You can't use push to elevate a broken roll to a clumsy one, basically. The rules have to include this to avoid people trying to make use of this loophole. In addition to whatever effects the roll has, if you roll a 7 or higher, you get a power die. However, if you roll a 2 to a 6, in addition to whatever effects the move has on a miss, the Game Master can take a break die. Again, break dice are the equivalent to power dice for the Game Master. He spends them to make fate turn against the players. Pushing a move is always the player's choice. A game master can never tell you to push a move. It is your character choosing to do something incredibly heroic or stupid, depending on how you want to look at it. Also, there is no limit on how many break dice the game master can hold, but they do lose them at the end of a session. Reach heaven through violence. When you attempt to strike down your foes in combat, roll plus body for melee or plus reflex for ranged. On a 10 or higher, deal your damage to a target or targets in range. You can additionally activate your weapon flourish. We already talked about those. On a 7 to 9, you exchange blows with your enemy. You deal damage but also take damage as established by whatever statistics the enemy has. You may also suffer additional harm or disaster. On a miss, your blows strike wide and you are fully exposed to retribution, harm, or disaster. Basically, you miss and the enemy can strike back without any issue. There is also the option of performing a called shot, where basically you make a broken roll in order to strike at a specific part of an enemy, like their legs, their eyes, etc., and get a specific result if you succeed. Basically something like blinding them, cutting their feet off so they fall on the ground, stuff like that. Because it requires more precision, these will always be broken rolls, so it's a risky move to make, because if you miss, you're kind of on the chopping block. Your attempt is successful on a 7 or more. The effect of your success depends on the game master. Acuity, the one we've already discussed. When you attempt to use your mental quickness and prowess to overcome your enemies in combat, roll plus mind. On a 10 or higher, gain 3 hold. You find an exploitable weakness in that enemy's armor, defenses, fighting style, or the environment around you. As long as you are fighting that enemy and take action on your knowledge, you can spend hold 1-to-1 to gain one of the following options. And then on a 7 to 9, you gain 2 hold, but the target also gets to choose one of the options against you. They get to choose before you, so be careful. And the options you can spend hold on are reducing a single source of damage from your target by 1, giving a single source of damage against your target one of the following tags: armor penetrating, forceful, messy, area, or destructive. You should now know what all of those mean. Or increase a single source of damage against your target by 1. Agility, when you attempt to perform impossible acrobatic feats in combat. On a 10 or higher, you gain 3 hold. On a 7 to 9, you gain 1 hold. You can spend this hold at any point during this combat when you move 1-to-1 to accomplish one of the following effects. This lasts for the entire battle. That's what during this combat means. The effects are: you run, fly, or jump up or along a normally impassable surface or obstacle, a high wall, the surface of water, etc. So basically you run over the water, you leap across the lake, you just jump so high, you pass the wall entirely, you crawl up it while it has no holds, stuff like that. Or you move over or pass through enemies and hazards unhindered. Or you can move to any range band between intimate and far in a single moment. You dash so quickly into or away from enemies, there's literally nothing they can do. Just suddenly pop out right next to an enemy and stab them to death. Hilarious. You're literally running so fast, an enemy who only saw you like vaguely in the distance suddenly has you right up in their face. It must be terrifying. Then there is bolster, when you attempt to rally your allies. Roll plus heat. On a 10 or more, you choose one of the options. On a 7 or 9, you can choose one of the options, but then you can no longer choose that option again until you take a rest, even if you roll higher than a 10. If no more of the options are available to you, you cannot make this move anymore until you rest. On a miss, you lose heart and you cannot make this move again until you rest. The options are: all allies that can hear you or see you and have no stamina remaining regain their heat stat in stamina, or a single ally that can hear you regains their heat stat in stamina. This does not require the condition that the ally has no more stamina left. Or one ally you can touch regains their composure. they lose the reeling or stun tag if they have them. Basically, you tell your allies to get their shit together and they kind of just square up again. Then there is aid. When in combat, you attempt to defend or aid a character, object, or location. Roll plus breath. On a 10 or more, you gain 3 hold. On a 7 to 9, you gain 1 hold. As long as you continue to stand in aid or defense of this character, object, or location, you can spend your hold 1-to-1 to accomplish the following effects. You can choose the same effect more than once, but only one per round. You can give that character a +1 forward, making their next roll more powerful. You could take an instance of damage against that character, object, or location against yourself, and then spend armor against it to maybe nullify it completely. You could also reduce the damage of an attack or an effect by 1 when it attempts to damage the thing you're aiding. If you are no longer standing in defense of your target, willingly or otherwise, for example, you run away or someone knocks you away, either way you lose your hold. I also lost the footage for this segment. Let's quickly finish off the list of moves. First, the final combat move, Might. When you use your physical strength to subdue, grapple, or throw, roll plus body, choose a target without the group or huge tags. On a 10 or more, you successfully wrestle, push, punch, grab, or halt your target. Choose any or all of the options below. On a 7 or higher, choose 2 of the options below. On a miss, if you targeted an enemy, that enemy can get one of the options against you. These options are: your target stops moving and cannot move until they escape your grasp. Your target takes 1 armor-piercing damage. Your target gains the reeling tag, or your target gains the crippled tag. Those were the moves applicable in combat scenarios. There are also utility moves you'll use in situations where you're not fighting. Overcome. When you tempt danger, disaster, mishap, or misfortune through your actions. Roll plus body, breath, mind, heat, or reflex. The Game Master will tell you which statistic you need to roll. On a 10 or more, you are successful and come away unscathed. On a 7 to a 9, you are successful, but the Game Master might choose to introduce an additional complication, trade-off, or misfortune. On a miss, prepare for the worst. Since this move is kind of a skill check mechanic, use the appropriate statistic for the situation. Query the cosmos. When you attempt to pry information from the universe, choose knowledge, which is plus mind, or meditation, also plus mind. If you choose knowledge, you consult your own knowledge about something, roll plus mind. On a 10 or more, the Game Master will tell you useful, interesting, and dangerous information about it. On a 7 to a 9, the information will either be dangerous or interesting, but not directly useful. Tell your Game Master how you know this information either way. On a miss, you simply know nothing about it. If you choose meditation, you spend about an hour in communion with a greater power. Tell your Game Master what. On a 10 or higher, the power, through the Game Master, will tell you something mysterious and important about a person, topic, or location of your choice. On a 7 to a 9, the answer will be cryptic, unclear, or simply an impression. On a miss, you expose yourself to something dark and malicious. Pry secrets. When you attempt to discern information from a person, area, or situation. On a 10 or higher, ask the Game Master 3 questions from the list below, and the Game Master will answer truthfully. On a 7 to a 9, ask 1. Take +1 forward when acting on the answers. That goes for both of these options, just pointing that out. On a miss, you can ask a question anyway, but the answer may or may not be truthful. You have to ask questions from the list. These questions are: who's really in charge here? What's about to happen? What here seems false or deceitful? What here could be useful to me? What has just happened here? What seems the safest path forward? Creation. When you attempt to create an item or object, if it is not rare or unusual, you can make it comfortably as long as you have access to materials and tools. As long as you have the time to work on your creation between rests, You can create it in 3 wealth increments per rest based on the market price. It will finish after your last rest and you can sell it or use it as you see fit. Those are some pretty complicated conditions, so let me explain. A regular sword costs 3 wealth at base market price, meaning as long as you have the materials and time, you can create it after 1 rest. If the game master allows it, you could attempt to make fine or rare items the same way. Remember, fine items are worth 3 times as much as a regular item of the same type. When you're making fine or rare items, you'll probably need to make a successful ply the market move in order to secure the necessary materials. Ply the market: when you stride the inner world marketplace looking for goods. If it's readily available, you can buy it at local prices. If you want it rarer, cheaper, more exotic or dangerous, roll plus heat. On a 10 or more, you get it or something like it. On a 7 to a 9, you get it, but it is way more expensive, comes with strings attached, cheap but bought from someone very suspect. You as the player get to pick one. On a miss, your asking around attracts unwanted attention from unsavory or powerful types. Or both. Once you've successfully plied the market, you can create your item. Then we have our first social move of the list, Bend Will, when you have leverage and seek to manipulate an audience. Roll plus heat. Manipulate meaning lie, cheat, seduce, intimidate, or perform. An audience meaning the people or person you mean to manipulate, and leverage meaning something your audience wants, whether your talent or your money. On a 10 or higher, your audience is impressed and will do as you want on only a promise of your leverage. On a 7 to a 9, they need some concrete assurance or proof of your leverage before they do anything. On a miss, not only is your audience not convinced, but your leverage has a lessened or no effect on further negotiations, and you will need a new leverage. Then another social move, but this one is more about the connections you have that might be helpful. Gather power. When in a populous location and you wish to seek aid, roll plus heat. If you have a good reputation in the area, take +1. If you spend a little wealth along the way, take an extra +1. Below is a list of possible types of aid: information, support, safety, or supplies. On a 10 or more, you gain an ally, contact, or useful connection with an influential individual or power group. This group or individual can freely offer information, support, safety, and supplies, though not necessarily without a price. You hit the jackpot. A big important person or group wants to help you, maybe for something in return, and they give you all sorts of help. On a 7 to a 9, you gain support of a person or power group interested in your cause. They may not be influential or powerful. They will offer you only one of the following: information, support, safety, or supplies, though not necessarily without a price. You catch one of the smaller fish and they don't have the resources to help you as much, they might still ask for something in return. On a miss, you get attention from an influential, mismatched, and possibly hostile local power. They will ask you for one of the following: information, support, safety, or supplies. If you don't give it to them, retribution will swiftly come your way. Those were kind of the social moves. Now we get into making your character stronger by training. Train when you have downtime to train and hone your skills, hours, days, etc. Mark experience and gain a single power die. Then, if you have XP equal to your level +3 or more, spend that XP to increase your level by 1, and choose a new move for your character as you increase your power and training. In addition, you can choose 1 or 0 of the following. Choose another character. That character has a breakthrough in their training or understanding. Choose another character. That character hears an interesting rumor or piece of news. Choose another character. That character either learns a secret or gains a secret of their own to keep. Choose another character. that character learns of an opportunity for power or influence. Then the final basic move which you use to end the game. End of session. When you reach the end of a session, all players discard any remaining power dice and the Game Master discards any break dice. Mark experience, as the Game Master indicates. Then, as a group, answer these questions. Did we fail in some regard? Did we expose ourselves to danger, cost, or retribution through our actions? Did we progress our story in a meaningful way? For every yes answer, the group can mark experience. This is of course because the system incentivizes character growth and making mistakes, learning from them, stuff like that, which is really cool in my opinion. So this is the end of my current explanation. I hope at this point you're ready to look at the archetypes, investigate them further, and choose how you would want to play this game. If people really want me to make more explanations about the specific character archetypes and their moves, I'll also do that. Maybe even a Game Master's guide if you really like this video. That's it for now. Hopefully more people can go and enjoy this RPG, and I'm really hopeful this video helps my players get over the fear of reading a manual so we can finally get to playing this thing. If you'll excuse me, I'll have to go and cook up a campaign for now. Bye. Oh, thank you to Abbadon for making this whole thing and for writing Kill 6 Billion Demons. It's a very good comic. He's a very cool guy. You should go and read it actually. More videos about it coming, probably.